Hear ye! Hear ye! My name is Samuel Seabury, and I present free thoughts on the proceedings of the Continental Congress. Heed not the rabble who scream revolution. They have not your interest at heart.
Oh my God, tear this dude apart.
Chaos and bloodshed are not a solution. Don't let them lead you astray. This Congress does not speak for me.
Let him be.
They're playing a dangerous game. I pray the King shows you his mercy. For shame, for shame. Heed not the
Hello, good morning, really afternoon. We are going to start looking at life in our 13 colonies, specifically our English colonies, which makes the United States. Eventually, not yet. That song was from Hamilton, of course, and, well, we're quite not there, but we are getting closer and closer to, well, the conflicts between the colonies and England. But today, before we even get to that point, we're going to start looking at the beginning of the government in the 13 colonies. And we're going to slowly look at what's going to inspire us Americans, or those Americans, to want to rebel from England. All right, so make sure you have your notebook out. Open up to the first section. This is a brand new set of notes. If you're going to type your notes, that's great. But you can make a new doc, or make sure you make a new section. This is going to be life in the colonies, or the English colonies. This is section 4. In this chapter, we're going to end up looking at the events leading up to and then encasing the French and Indian War. And then we're going to start looking at all the events that's going to ultimately lead to revolution. So let's get started. Pause it here if you are getting your stuff ready. Okay, here we go. Again, pause it if you need to get your notebook out. Stop staring at the screen and get your notebook out. All right, here we go. So our life in the English colonies. Pause it if you didn't write the title, because write the title. Here is our first part. It's going to be looking at our colonial governments. As you saw, if you had certain colonial regions, charters were given to people to create colonies. So, for example, the colony of Rhode Island here in New England was given a charter by the King Charles II, an English king. So our colonial governments, each colony is going to end up forming or having their own government once they are created. So all those colonies we made or saw about on our posters, they're all going to have their own form of government to rule over, have laws, etc. They were given power by a royal charter, meaning the king gave them permission to not only have a colony, but also to create a government under the king. And the king himself still rules over all of these colonies. So as part of that royal charter, you basically agree that the king is ruler of you. Even if you have your own government of a colony, you answer to the king and you pay taxes eventually, possibly, towards the king. Pause it here if you're still writing. I'm going to keep moving on. All right, which leads us to our first legislatures and governors in our colonies. Over here, remember how we talked about John Smith and how he didn't marry Pocahontas? Hey, here's a picture of John Smith. So governments are going to have governors who are kind of like our governors for states today. They're just the head of the government in specific colonies. So for example, here in Missouri, Governor Parsons is like the president of Missouri, if you will. Same kind of idea in these early colonies. And under this governor, he's going to have an advisory council, quote unquote, who advise the governor on different matters. So could be you have someone in charge of trade, someone could be in charge of farming, someone in charge of relationships with the Native Americans. All of these people help the governor rule and make decisions. And the king or queen picked the governors specifically in royal colonies. So Virginia, for example, and the Carolinas were both royal colonies, meaning that technically the king ruled those colonies and created them, so he got to appoint who was in charge. The people didn't vote. So in those cases, like we've said, typically, if you were not in line to become king or inherit things, but you were royalty, you may be appointed to become a governor. So distant cousins and relatives, usually. And the people elected officials and proprietary colonies. And a proprietary colony basically were generally set up by people looking to make money. So businesses, traders, merchants, those colonies, since they're ruled by companies, would actually vote to elect who would be their leaders. And that's generally how leadership works. Pause it here if you're still writing, but I'm going to continue in the video. Which takes us to some of the first bodies, first buildings, first groups of legislatures. And some of the colonies are also going to elect representatives to help make laws and policies. So if you think of our modern government today, we elect senators to represent the people, and they are who make our laws or policies. So we're going to see some of the earliest being created here. And generally, laws would be proposed, sent to the advisory council to review it, and then given to the governor to make it into a law or be approved. And one of the first elected bodies of legislature was actually in Virginia, which, remember, the king had made that a royal colony. It was a colony created by the king. So the people will actually make an assembly, so they have some sort of a voice. And that picture at the bottom there is the actual original Virginia First Assembly building. And originally, Virginia is just going to have one giant legislating thing, but later in time it will split into two separate, kind of like we have today with the House and the Senate. And in New England colonies, or NE colonies if you want to abbreviate, town meetings are actually going to be a huge part of their government. So if we were all farmers and we lived in our own town, we would meet as a community to make decisions, vote on rules and laws. And let's say, I don't know, someone had trespassed into my fields and put a fence up saying it's their land. Us people at the town hall meetings could determine or fix those conflicts, etc. We still see town meetings today. So city hall meetings, for example. And here is where people would meet to decide on different topics. Go ahead and pause here if you are writing. If I'm going fast for you, pause it. That's totally fine. I'm going to keep moving on then. And we're going to start seeing the political changes happening in England. It's going to actually start with King James II becoming king. There's some pictures, or really paintings, of him. Yeah, he's got some very long hair. And he wanted more control over England and the colony. So he wanted to become more of a traditional king who has absolute rule over everything he rules. But if you look at history, most of the time people do not like having a dictator for a king. So he also wanted to unite New England colonies under one single government. So instead of having governors for each of those states, he wanted just one to rule over that whole area. And he's going to appoint Sir Edmund Andros to be governor of that giant New England region. Pause it here if you're still writing, but I'm going to go to, I think there's just one more and then we're done. Oh, JK. Pause it after this one. And he's going to end up being disliked, Sir Edmund is, because he's going to limit the power the people have. Pause it here if you're writing. I'm going to the next slide. Oh, jeez. Oh, hello? Okay. And that's where we're going to see the English Bill of Rights being created. And it's going to end up being written in 1689. You don't need to write this stuff over here. I'm going to have stuff here for you to write. But this is some basic ideas of what it's going to do. So English Parliament, which Parliament's just like Congress, but a lot of European countries have parliaments. It's the same as a Congress, though. Will actually vote to replace King James II. And they will create this bill called the English Bill of Rights, or it's rights of the people made into law. And most importantly, it's going to reduce the powers of the English monarchs, kings or queens. One thing not to be too confused of here with these Bill of Rights, these early ones aren't so much rights of the people, but more specifically for the wealthy. And it's going to give more power to Parliament. So remember, people who were elected into office back in this point, and you kind of can argue still today, generally are wealthier people. So it's going to give more power to Parliament. In some regards, the people, yes, to have a bigger voice. And this will inspire the American colonies to do the same. We are going to want to have more of a voice in Parliament. Later in time, you're going to see us getting very upset about some taxes because we had no voice in it, and we believe we should. And to the right, again, you don't need to write this stuff, but just some ideas. It's going to put restrictions on royal family members' rights, so instead of them having total power. They have lost some power. Also, the most important parts of the English Bill of Rights were that it limited the right of raising money through taxation of Parliament. So it's going to help kind of prevent the kings from just keeping all this money for themselves. So, and last thing for you to get, pause it here if you're still writing. The last thing we're going to go over is the colonial courts. These pictures over here are some examples of what these courtrooms would have looked like. This one down here is from the Salem witch trials, actually. So it is a girl who said she was bewitched by the person being charged. And they said she was like scarred by this witch's witchcraft. And this one was fainting and stuff. Oh, and that her child fainted? It's so confusing. Oh my gosh. All right, so the colonial courts are going to be a big part of government. You're going to start seeing courtrooms being established through the colonies to help rule over law and crimes and keep people safe. And courts are actually going to be used to help control local affairs. So instead of being sent back to England for crimes and problems here in the colonies, they could settle it here in America. They don't have to go overseas and sail for months to solve crimes or legal issues. And actually, a good example of early rights that these courts decided was a colonist was actually found innocent of a crime that he had committed for saying some things. And what that crime was actually a man named John Peter Zenger was printing false statements about the governor of New York. And his attorney argued that he could publish whatever he wished as long as it was true. And jury members believed that colonists had the right to voice their ideas openly and found him not guilty. So basically, he had written some things about the governor and that were true, but he was basically accused of giving false information. But since it was true information, he had the right because of freedom of speech. So something you can kind of look at today in terms of this would be when you hear people touting fake news, yeah, there's some news that could be misleading, but generally speaking, if news is speaking the truth, that's not a crime. And people, when they don't want to believe it, they just call it fake news, and that's part of the struggle we see today. That's what I got for you today. I am going to have us present our posters tomorrow, starting with our English trade laws, and we'll have another one of these to watch tomorrow going over the first couple posters that we will be sharing in class. Don't forget to finish your vocab for tomorrow, and don't forget to record yourself reading your journal question answer from your journal on Flipgrid. Have a great day, and I will see you when I see you.